Hey everyone, it's Larry Kotlikoff here with my great buddy Steve Laffey. Uh, Steve is one wunderkind in terms of his career. Went from extreme poverty in Rhode Island to getting a scholarship at Bowdoin College, then getting a scholarship at Harvard Business School, then uh, I would say rescuing a major bank in Tennessee. Uh, Huge success. Going back to where he grew up in Cranston, Rhode Island, and which was a complete disaster as a town and bank on the verge of bankruptcy, and deciding to give back and try and rescue that town, and became mayor. Ran twice. I guess you were twice,
Sure, Mayor. Yeah, reelected
two
by
terms
the
of mayor, and
widest margin in Cranston history. So at the time,
yeah, so took over from the old time uh, politicians who were going nowhere and driving the city into and down the tubes, and made dramatic improvements. Then he moved to Colorado, has been running and trying to help our country by making a film about saving America that he produced. I actually am in the film. Um, and then he more recently has tried to run for president in the Republican primary. Did not attract enough attention because we have people who are very good at, you know, being nasty and grabbing headlines and saying outrageous things. And that's what the press wants to cover as opposed to any issues. But here we are. President Trump is elected, and it's been 3 weeks, and we have him uh, making dramatic moves that is threatening basic science. It's threatening Greenland, Panama, our alliances, uh, tariffs on China, tariffs potentially coming, major tariffs on Canada and Mexico, our major trading partners. Uh, Europeans been becoming very alarmed about uh, what may have in mind. He wants to take over the Gaza Strip and make it into a Miami, Trump, I guess, redevelopment zone, move the Palestinians out, and maybe not let them come back. So he has big plans, and he has the sidekick Elon Musk, who's not elected, who's running amok in many ways. When you get your fingers into the payment system of the U.S. Treasury, that means you probably have access to things like Social Security records and uh, IRS records, because these are interconnected, and certainly the IRS is a part of the U.S. Treasury, and the trustee, the top treasurer, the head of the treasurer, Treasury Secretary is the chief trustee for Social Security. So imagine you hire a 20-year-old who's a nutbag to begin with, who's not been vetted, and you give them access to the Social Security uh, earnings record system, and they decide to go and scramble those records. I mean, that's my nightmare, that these people will, just for the fun of it, in the middle of the night after they're stoned, and Elon Musk seems to have some kind of a drug problem himself, will start scrambling our Social Security records, maybe eliminating any backups, and our entire system. So nobody would be getting their checks or getting the wrong checks, and nobody has records to prove. And we have a system where it already takes three hours to get an answer on the telephone from Social Security, and the answer is they hang up. You wait online for 3 hours, and then they hang up. And the commissioner who was trying to fix that, Governor O'Malley, from Georgia, I'm from Maryland, prior Governor of Maryland, has been has resigned, so there's no commissioner right now. Anyway, Steve, give us your take on these events. You were opposed very vigorously to Trump. You're one of the only real Republican who actually stood up and told the
Yeah.
truth about Trump, that this was not the American dream. This was the American nightmare. But take it away.
Well, number one, to backtrack, yes, I was fairly successful until after being the mayor of Cranston,
Yeah.
and since then in trying to convince America with the movie Fixing America that you're in, which is almost like a secular version of the prophet Jeremiah from the Old Testament today, because these things are actually happening. I mean, you talked at the beginning of the movie that America's broke. This is 2011. So to take it forward, yes, I was the first one to take on Donald Trump and to actually really take him on, because the country is full of nothing but sycophants and backstabbers. And by sycophants, I mean people like Ramsawamy, who would run and say, I'm running against Donald Trump. He's a great leader. And you, what the hell are you doing? Who runs against a great leader? Don't you support him? So that's our country today, and that's the media today. So fast forward, and I say correctly that Trump would win this election if we didn't stop him, and that what he's doing today he would actually do. Donald Trump is a narcissist. So for even people listening who are Donald Trump fans, you would have to agree with that. And so in his second term, what he's doing, taking advantage of this disastrous Democratic Party that lied about, the health of Biden. And everybody heard me say, listen to me on a Substack or on TV, that before the Biden debate, that Biden would get crushed and Biden would lose. And Biden would never be the nominee. I said it for 4 years. He would never be the
I know.
nominee. And people thought I was nuts. And I wasn't nuts. I know this stuff. Whether it helps me or not one day, I actually know what's happening. And so Trump has devised a new plan, and it's now total loyalty. So I would say, rather than him being an anarchist, he's a fascist. In other words, these are fascist things when you tinker with companies and they have to come to you with fealty and bow necessarily, or start every conversation with what a great guy Donald Trump is. And let me tell you about oil. What a great guy Donald Trump is. He's the greatest leader. And or if you do a TV show, or if you're Fox News, you have to change. Or if you work for MSNBC, Joe Scarborough and his wife have to go visit and bow to him and come back and say, we're going to report on this if they want to have a job. This is fascism. People forget what fascism is. Fascism is Mussolini makes the trains run on time. It's not communism. It's like, we'll give you money if you do this. We'll take away money if you do that. So that's what we're heading down the road to. So to back it up on just one topic that's happened since, I have 55 executive orders in front of me, the list thereof. Some of them are so bizarre you can't believe it. For example, becoming president, and this is a Biden problem too, saying he would never pass an executive order to pardon his son or anybody, and he does it. This is where America's losing its faith in government. Trump comes in, he takes somebody who he says is a libertarian, who's a violent person, pardons him. He takes Steve Bannon, who's already pardoned, who, by the way, pleaded guilty yesterday to defrauding people, defrauding plumbers. This is one of his people. He goes ahead and violent people from January 6th. Not all were violent. Some people probably were mistreated. I'm not an expert in January 6th, but some were violent and attacked police people. He pardoned them. You go down the list and then you come up with the tariff stuff. So you're an eminent economist. Most economists agree that tariffs are not a really good thing. Sometimes they can be used. America used them in the 1800s to a great deal to grow certain industries. We get it. I've talked about tariffs on communist China publicly since 2005, because in 2005, when I ran for the US Senate, Larry, I said communist China would never be a democracy. And every single person in Bill Clinton and George Bush's administration knows they won't become a democracy. How did I know that? There's no evidence of it in history of the United States of America and the history of the world. By giving someone a better trade deal to a totalitarian regime, that they become a democracy. Guess what? They didn't. Guess what? We made a movie driving through the country where they bankrupted cities and towns along the way. Guess what? I said in 2015, when Donald Trump announced he was going to be president, that he would win. Again, people thought I was a crackpot. He won. Because on the margin, as elections are decided, people are lying down going, I lost my job. I'll vote for the guy who's against China. But let's take it to the new one, which is Canada and Mexico. It was Trump that signed the new NAFTA deal in 2018, right? And so
Right.
everybody in capitalist world makes decisions. You don't have to watch Milton Friedman with a pencil back in 1975 to understand that a lot of this stuff crosses borders back and forth because there was some certainty of how things would be done. And the law of comparative advantage, meaning that if Canada has clean water running through waterfalls or oceans that can produce energy that does a lot with aluminum, that we now get 50% of our aluminum from Canada. And if you put 25% tariffs on it for a day, for a month, for a week, for half a year, you introduce a lot of uncertainty into the world's economy, what's happening next, into the Canada United States relationship, when it should be that recognizing that they're our greatest ally, right? Along with Japan, along with we can argue over Australia and Great Britain and even Mexico. And what these people do to promote jobs that actually a lot of them in America. And so the stupidity of Donald Trump is that he's sitting there today, and whoever placates him the most, whether it's the leader of Mexico, Sheinbaum, who placated him and calls him, whether it might be the leader of Ukraine regarding what's happened, who calls him and visits him, and whoever does this with him will get a better deal. That's not America. And and
Yeah.
and I would want people to know how I think you should deal with Donald Trump. It's the opposite of what the premier of Canada did. You don't go visit him and say, "Oh, Mr. President," blah blah blah. Then he just busts your chops, and then he just keeps busting your chops. And now the leader of Canada is going to leave, right? He's gone. And so what you do is you always be quiet and double down, because for everybody listening, if Canada said back to the 25% tariffs that were going to be installed on everything, but then the 25% tariffs that may be installed by March 4th on aluminum and steel. If they say, that's fine, we're just putting 50% export tariffs on everything. Good luck with building a car 3 months from now. Good luck with having an automobile in a Ford dealership. Good luck with unemployment in your country. And then shut up. That's the only way to get people to understand that the emperor has
I
no clue.
agree 100%. I mean, China could turn around. I was talking to Martin Wolf, who's the chief economics correspondent for the Financial Times on the podcast that we taped a couple days ago. And yes, we were talking about, the analogy, or the analog between Trump and Hitler in 33. Okay, Trump's taking over, potentially recruiting thugs by pardoning these people that some of whom are true criminals and were out to kill police. So now he has a bit of a strike force, and then he's got uh, the courts that he's intimidating and disregarding, uh, and uh, and then yeah, ruling by saying things like, "I'm going to just take over large land areas." So yeah, the uncertainty of the economic policy, uh, and uh, and just whether or not he really knows what he's doing from minute to minute when he makes these
Yeah. These
pronouncements, I'm going to take over, and he continues to make them. I'm going to take over Greenland. I'm going to take over Gaza. So I asked Martin what might happen if he continues down this path, and I asked him whether we could see a time where uh, China says to Europe and the rest of the world, look, you either trade with us or you trade with the US, not both. So if you go to a country like Chile, they do 4 times more trade with China than they do with the US. So their answer is going to be very simple. Okay, we're working with China. And now the grapes from Chile don't come, now the wine from Chile doesn't come to the US. And Canada being threatened to be invaded, in effect, to become the 51st state because Trump wants that to happen. That's manifest destiny. They could say, you're not going to get any oil from us, no They're sending 8 million barrels a day to us. They could say no lumber, no aluminum. And, and then you could have the European Union say, well, you're threatening Greenland. Maybe Trump's taken over Greenland at this point, and they could say, well, we're now going to align with China and use China to help us deal with Russia and goodbye America. So we could become completely isolated and really face a major recession as well as major inflation through all this. Uh,
And these are the things, well, I would say it this way, as everybody knows who knows me, that I think China is the world's problem. I think now it's a totalitarian regime, as I said it would be. I said we should have stopped trading with them a long time ago. But that's because of human rights. That's because we're a better country. That's because what they do to other countries when they go into Africa and bring their own workers, right? And we could have stopped this in 2000 or 2005, and now it's a very hard thing to do. When it comes to, for example, when it comes to the Panama Canal, for example, I am one of those people who are old enough to think it was the worst idea of all time to give it up. But in saying that, the guy who runs Panama is actually a U.S. ally. He's not an anti-American guy. Now, if indeed China is controlling both sides, we can stop that. Now, if there's something in the treaty that we could but if he wanted to do things appropriately, go to Congress. For example, so people are listening today again back about tariffs with Canada. If indeed if I was the president, we would have our allies get together and say, listen, let's look at where we build steel from Australia, how to get it to America. Who's better at building high rolled steel? Who's better at how do we have a fabrication plant to rebuild a bridge that we don't have right now if we get bombed? And we would look at our allies, but mostly we'd look at Canada and say, wait a second, then we need X, Y, and Z. And so how do we get there in 5 or 6 years? And how do we present this to the American public that we need rare earth minerals, that we can't rely on China for that? We can't be held hostage on prescription drugs, things like that. Instead, here's the thing about Donald Trump. While he may be up early and he may stay up late, he's lazy. He's a narcissist that is lazy. And so what he, and neither he or Elon Musk will do, is make a presentation with what I call a Harvard Business School slideshow presentation, which would show, hey, I'll just give you an example. There's 23,000 people working at the Federal Reserve. They aren't doing a very good job. And so we want to do some things to reduce the amount of people who have to work at the Federal Reserve. We could probably get it down to 5,000 people. I'm just making this up. And here's how: using AI, using the fact that we don't need all these reports, right? There's a lot of things we could do in each department, but you would go to Congress with a bill, Department of Energy. Why do we have a Department of Energy? Okay. I mean, look at the Department of Energy's largest loan is to DET Electric. $7.1 billion loan guarantee for renewable energy generation and battery storage installations in Michigan. Doesn't sound like a really good loan. So I mean, it's been made. We probably have to honor it, but go to the American public with things that they can then understand when you're trying to cut government spending. But the thing about tariffs with Canada, just to get back to the stupidest thing I've ever heard, is things that really hurt certainty. So, for example, if you own Alcoa aluminum today, if you own U.S. Steel, another really stupid thing, but nobody wants Nippon Steel to buy U.S. Steel. But I'm just telling everybody right now, U.S. Steel, if its name was Jim Jones Steel, it wouldn't have been blocked. Nippon Steel is going to put billions of dollars, help union workers, modernize, and get better steel in the United States of America. It's only being blocked because, and I want to be very clear with you, the name is U.S. Steel. Back in the day of 1917, it was the world's largest company. Today, it's a middle-level kind of crappy steel company. It's going to go out of business one day. These people at U.S. Steel are so stupid that when the stock was 37 in 2017, they issued no equity. When it was 6, they issued 47% of the stock and doubled the amount of shares outstanding. So it's not a well-run company, but Japan is one of our greatest allies. We should be doing this all together to buttress our enemies, and we're not, Larry. So take the Gaza Strip. the way to deal with so far he says he's going to make it into the Riviera and export 2 million Palestinians to where? There isn't a country in the world that will take one of them. They destroyed Lebanon. They almost destroyed Jordan.
Right.
These are all, so I feel bad for them, don't get me wrong. But it's a group of people that when Ariel Sharon left the Gaza Strip, as I said, a major mistake. I've had done shows on this. I said it then, I'll say it now. It was the biggest mistake of Ariel Sharon's life. What did the Palestinians do when they saw the video? Go watch the videos. When they saw anything made by Jewish people, by Israel people. There was a flower shop. You can watch the video. You could have operated the flower shop. They threw rocks at it and destroyed it. So none of them are leaving. It's not happening. Where would they go? But instead of the Jordanian king saying, or not Netanyahu, right? When he's standing next to him and the bomb gets thrown at him, Netanyahu should just look at him and say, you must have lost your mind. Someone has to say, the head of Egypt, a military sort of junta, let's say, they have big fences. They are taking 0 Palestinians. They know they will lose the country. But no one's willing to say, stick it up your you know what, Mr. President. And until people do this, my prediction is that it'll all happen at once. Much like the French Revolution, although it won't be as violent, and what happened to Robespierre at the end, right? Mm-hmm. Eventually, all at once, everybody will turn. All the cowards, the Tim Scotts of the world. He's running for president because he's black, because, he's passed the bill. No, he's never passed the bill. He's just a happy guy. He loves President Trump. He loves him now. Today, literally, Larry Kudlow is on TV with the new head of the budget, a man named Vaught, right? So do you want to know what the man who's head of the OMB budget is saying today?
No, go ahead.
He says, quote, but you know, Larry, the budgets put forth by the president in the last term, quote, they got to balance. I don't have to read it anymore. The budgets of President Trump in 2016, 17 never got to balance. He ran up twice the debt in 4 years that Obama did in 8 years. What we have is Larry Kudlow saying, oh, yeah, wow, they got to balance. Not interrupting. That's why I can't host a show on a national TV show. Because I would interrupt Mr. Vaught and say, have you lost your mind? Where were you? Like, you just said, when did they get to balance?
Yeah.
This is the problem. The problem, everything is at stevelaffey.com. The cycle of death is a terrible education system that we don't replace by making lots of things, if you said free, right? Whether it's right? So people don't know what we're talking about. Your listeners do. My listeners do. The person walking down, maybe in Fort Collins here, where this highly educated place, maybe do. The guy in Detroit has no idea what I'm talking about. He's 33 and can't make change. So he became a MAGA person, let's say, and he doesn't know, he thinks, listen, folks, just so you know, I'm referred to by Democrats as maybe the original Tea Party guy with derision, that Laffey guy. You can watch a video, that Laffey guy. He was doing the Tea Party before the Tea Party. I'm a very fiscally conservative, Calvin Coolidge conservative. I never let any budget in my house. I have no debt. Everything's balanced or run surpluses everywhere. Doesn't matter where I am. The kids have surpluses. I have surpluses. And yet, I go to a Tea Party meeting in 2018, and I'm booed for saying something like, on April 16th, President Trump told the Washington Post in 2016 that he would not only balance the budget, he would pay off all the debt. That should have been a disqualifying event to be president. And you have people all over the country. People were booing me at a Tea Party meeting. That's how bad it's gotten worse, Larry, where people don't understand what we're saying.
What are you thinking is going to happen here now that we've got, do you think the next week we're going to see Trump disregard these court orders to restore funding? For example, we've got major cuts to NIH funded grants to all the universities throughout the country.
He wants major cuts. And believe me, I'm into major cuts. He needs to have a reconciliation act with Congress and make the cuts. There's lots of cuts to make. I am one of those people who's happy that someone's pointing out in a major way, but doing it in the wrong way, what I did in Cranston, Rhode Island. The way I got people to vote in a bankrupt city, my way all the time, was I put out videos. I had videos of people sleeping on the job that went nationally viral, and I was on CNN. I had videos of crossing guards making in today's dollars $226 an hour with a union contract that they couldn't be moved. So schools had closed and crossing guards were standing nowhere near a school with no kids getting paid.
Hmm.
So when I videotaped all that and put it on out there, it went national, and guess what? I got my way. These people lack the work ethic or the brain power, although Mr. Musk is obviously a very smart guy in certain ways. Because we make the mistake of every day saying, if that guy's a great baseball player, maybe he can advise me on finance. We make them. I only know certain things, Larry. I never pretend to know how to screw a light bulb in. I never get on a ladder. I know finance, and I know how to run people and put them in the right place at the right time. That's my skill set. That's what I really do well. The president of the United States does not have any of these skill sets, but we've come down to an election cycle where we're now electing the most known person, Obama being a notable exception. But we're only electing people like they did in Italy back in the day when a TV magnate got elected. We now have a Trump, Biden been around for 47 years, and now Trump, because we have a problem with our education system. So how does this work out? Here's the problem. And I'm just saying this from politics that I've lived in. I fixed Cranston, Rhode Island in under 100 days and didn't tell anybody about it because it was apparent to me that it was fixed, but not to get into what we did. And it just started happening, right? Bond rating going up, getting reelected. You only get 100 days before everybody starts backing up. So Trump is actually really starting to tick off some of the people in the Republican Party with some of the things that he's saying. This will continue because he'll go back and forth and back and forth. At some point, some steel executive will have to stand up and say, listen, I don't care what you're saying. It takes me 3 years minimum. If I start today, if you put 50% tariffs on all the incoming steel, I take 3 years to build it. I need 10 years certainty after that so I can recoup some profits. You're not going to be reelected. The Congress is going to go Democrat. Why would I start building anything right now? That's the problem. If you go to Congress and you have relationships with allies and you have the right people in the right place, then people say, oh, okay, so for national defense purposes, we need some more aluminum plants somewhere along. We need another shipbuilding. We need to build more nuclear aircraft carrier, whatever it might be.
Okay, so this guy is producing maximum uncertainty, maximum economic
Yeah.
uh, or potential, major disruption in economic decisions because of that uncertainty. And do you think this game is just going to go on, or do you think we've got 4 years of this person? Do you think he's going to just destroy the country at the end of the day, economically and internationally, in terms of our relationships with our allies? Will we have allies? Will there be this mass? You're very good at predicting, looking into the future. I've learned over the years. So how bad do you think this is going to be? I mean, do you really think he's going to take over the Panama Canal, put in?
No. And again, if you listen to me in Panama, the way to stop it is just tell Mr. President we have no national defense, but 150,000 of us are willing to die. We're willing to die if you come in here. We will fight you and you'll have to kill us. He'll never do it. So there are ways like the Danish people, I feel totally terrible because if I were president or anybody normal went to Greenland, went to the Danish people and said, listen, we got a real problem. China, Russia, what they're doing in these areas where there are no people. I know the Wilsonian democracy thought process that these are borders and we don't want to violate them. But see, Trump doesn't believe this. I do. He doesn't believe this stuff, right? He doesn't believe that Ukraine had a border. He just believes in power politics. So that would be the right way to handle it. But yes, if Trump gets to keep going and the Republicans don't realize that no matter what, remember, when you control all sides of the House and the Senate, and you have a president like, say, 2004 with Bush, 2 years later, you usually face a disaster, at least in the House. In the case of Bush in 2006, he lost everything, the House and the Senate. When people start feeling that, let's say 7 months from now, when that starts to be apparent, you will see everybody turn on him. And then you will see the rage of Donald Trump, right? You will see something that you haven't seen before because people won't obey what he says. There'll be congressmen, maybe be the Freedom Caucus, maybe it'll be whatever. The only really bad thing, of course, happening for the country too is that the Democratic Party has not gotten its act together by one little iota. They don't have to have their phrases in the morning and say constitutional crisis. Chuck Schumer should not get on TV and defend federal workers who make more than people in the private sector. He should not do that. Sometimes when when I find in politics when my opponent is doing something really silly, just let him do it. Hang on, have fun. You don't say a word. But they're actually defending the indefensible. We have lots of waste and fraud in the federal government. We do. And so this is a real problem. And so the Democratic Party should be reorganizing, and they should have been like, for example, these are like 75-25 issues. People of America who elected Trump on the margin, 80-20, don't want men swimming with women in women's sports. They don't want it. They don't want bathrooms for their kids. Whether people listen to the show agree with it or not, they generally don't want bathrooms open to both sexes. So there are things the Democratic Party could do to really help themselves over the 2-year period, because if they don't hop on board about nuclear energy, right? If they don't realize that whatever anybody thinks, in order for capitalism to thrive, you need a rule of law and you need cheap energy. You need other things too. So they should have been for nuclear power 20 years ago. They don't have to be for coal. They have to be for natural gas. Natural gas is better than oil. And we're producing a lot of natural gas. They didn't have to be for all electric cars. As I said correctly in 2018, in 2019, in 2020, this is not like a massive computer where you have a portable 37-pound, I go to Harvard Business School, 37-pound portable IBM computer that I have to pay $3,000 for. And when I leave school, it's worth $600. And things keep happening, right? There are only so many people because the middle class has maybe 2 people working. They both need cars. They can't refill, right? They can't park it inside. There's an apartment right to my north here. People can't park inside. What happens to an electric car? That's why Toyota had the message all the time with their RAV4 Prime, with their hybrids. As they make a transition, they didn't get screwed like Ford, GM, and the other companies, right? Because those people have a lack of real leaders. So the Democratic Party needs to figure out some of this stuff. The guy who ran
And,
Microsoft,
they
the
had
guy who ran
no,
Microsoft is for small nuclear power plants. Why don't the Democratic Party hop on that?
I
These
think,
are
I
easy
think the
things.
problem is that I think we need honest to God, I think we need a third party.
We do.
But
I've tried.
I think it has to work like this. I just heard Andrew Yang speak over at Brown. I thought, well, gosh, maybe he could collect enough money, and he has this forward party that he's trying to put together. But he just sounded like uh, a lightweight intellectually, and it was all about, I went to Brown, you guys are from Brown, we're the greatest people in the world. It was really
I don't think we're going to get a third party. The only chance we had was no labels. You and I have been through this since 2012, right? Where people
well,
spend
what I'm
50.
thinking is that we need to have somebody with lots of money who's charismatic. What we've seen is that we don't actually need an entire party to be developed in order for somebody to become president and have a lot of ability to change the direction in the right direction. So if we had somebody who had $100 million to spend on getting on the ballot across the country and was charismatic, because charisma seems to be more important than ideas, but had both ideas and charisma, uh, and just gets himself on the ticket. I mean, Ross Perot had 19% in that election when Clinton against Bush. Um, Bush,
Ross Perot would have won if he hadn't dropped out talking about
yeah,
a
if he
Black
hadn't
Hawk
been a crazy,
helicopter and got
yeah,
back in. He actually would have won.
yeah, he was basically a nutbag, but partly he was very smart and
Yeah,
terrific, charismatic, and very, putting his finger on key problems, but partly he was kind of paranoid and
yeah.
think people trying to go
and he
after.
had a great failing, but he would have won. So there is a thought to be made about that. If you ask me what's about to happen, I don't see Donald Trump. He just issued some more executive orders. This is where, unfortunately, the country's okay with this. In other words, Biden did some executive orders. He ignored the courts when it came to student loans. So now here come Republicans controlling both sides of the House in a very erratic, and the real problem is a narcissistic. So people who are narcissistic as they get older don't get cured. Almost nobody gets cured of narcissism. If that's unfortunately what he grew up with and has, I feel very bad for him. And if he could keep it to himself, it wouldn't be such a problem. But what's happening is the only reason J.D. Vance could ever be the vice president is that he look at these people. They change their mind thinking they want power and they back the president on anything. So he's an extreme lightweight, a man who's only never had a job for more than 2 years in a row. He wrote a book that he now disagrees with. Go read my book. I agree with just about it. There's a couple of things, you get older. There's one or two things in any book you've written, you're like, I wish I hadn't written that in 2009 or whatever. But the fundamental point is totally correct. The things I said in 2005, I'm saying today. So the problem that's going to happen is that things are going to have to get so bad in this country that much like Cranston, Rhode Island, Cranston, Rhode Island was the worst run city in America. The mayor before me overspent by $25 million and didn't tell anybody, didn't do audit for 3 years. The mayor before him was caught with $150,000 of campaign cash and avoided jail because he was in the union. The mayor before him was the governor and then went to jail. Those are the mayors before me, right? So we're heading down that road where I actually hope that America becomes in a macrocosm, Cranston, Rhode Island, where I don't hope for things to be so bad. But Larry, there really isn't any way, we haven't discussed this, to roll $17 trillion of debt in 3 years. See, the lack of education system, people don't understand. If you ask people, and I did when we made the movie, I just didn't put it in the movie. We have 30-year bonds and 1-month bills and some notes.
So, the only way to get rid of that much debt would be hyperinflation. And we have other off the book debts that are inflation index, like Social Security. So tell me, what do you think about financial markets? Where do you think they're going to go? Do you foresee a big drop in the stock market? Do you think interest rates are going to shoot up at some point? I guess they're going up already.
Yeah.
But
Well, real interest rates, I think, when we say real interest rates for people, inflation-adjusted interest rates are going higher.
right.
There isn't any way to really resolve this problem because, as we say in the movie of 2012 that came out, that we crossed the chasm. I always believed when we borrowed more than 20 trillion of public, now we're at 28 trillion of what we have outstanding, there was no going back mathematically, unless you do a couple of things. One, could you wake up on Friday night and say no foreigners are going to get paid? $8 trillion goes away. Okay, now real rates would go exploding, but they won't probably do that on Friday night because then you have to balance the budget because you can't borrow anymore. Two, could you repress rates in one of two ways? Could you actually, I even heard the guy who's called the Bond King say this could happen. Could you actually say, no matter what it says on your coupon, you're getting paid 2%. So now we took interest rates down to 750 billion from $1 trillion plus at some point in the future. Or do you actually change things like Social Security's adjustment for inflation to make it a lower number? And like after World War II, run inflation higher for many years to pay people back. In one of the most famous speeches that no one even actually pays attention to, Richard Nixon, when he got out of the gold window. If you watch the speech, and you're old enough to have watched it, I've watched it 25 times, and I can't believe he says this. He literally says, if you don't leave America, you probably won't notice, meaning the depreciation of the dollar. He got away with saying that.
Mm-hmm.
So people get away with saying things that are so crackpotish that I actually can't believe that. But no one interrupts me. I just gave you the budget director lying, the new budget director lying, and Larry Kudlow, who's in the pocket for Trump, not interrupted. So it has to get so bad. So I think it will. And I think that we're heading down this road, since we're the cleanest shirt in the dirty laundry of shirts because, other people have problems and we're still the world reserve currency. And and as you've mentioned, the trade deficit itself is not a problem, right? If people want dollars, because we're running, it's by itself having a 2% trade deficit because people want our stuff and we buy less of their stuff, et cetera, et cetera. And they take our dollars as a good paper currency, right? Okay. But I believe what will happen eventually is that there'll be a very quick period where rates will rise precipitously, much like go back and look at a graph of Greece in 2008. It's not like, and again, we're the world superpower. It may happen slowly, but I think it can happen quickly. I don't know when, over the next 3 years, let's say.
And then you foresee a default? That's what
No,
you're
I
talking.
think in some ways we'll have to default on something, but I don't see that happening. I would prefer it to happen this way, where literally all hell breaks loose and we have to solve our problems.
Mhm.
That would be better than a slow death.
The problems, I think these problems with the tax system, the healthcare system, the Social Security system, these are such major
Major
institutions
problem.
that can't be fixed
No.
by, uh, adjusting some loose bolt or something, or changing some part that's a little, rickety. You need to basically shut down the existing systems and start
Yeah.
something from scratch that's actually modern and it's efficient. I mean, Social Security is uh, unbelievably inefficient.
65 trillion. And here's the real issue with America today. Whether it comes to like Ukraine war, how do we not win the Ukraine war? These people stink at fighting. They got 10,000 North Koreans coming in who just kind of wander into fields and get killed. The Ukrainians doing almost nothing and actually still kind of winning, taking part of Russia. How do we not just like win? So Iran's been bothering us since 1979. We've never taken care of Iran. We've gone into Iraq. We've ignored stuff. We talk about Hamas. What are they talking about? And when it comes to a big problem in America, wouldn't now if you went to AI and said, "What did Steve Laffey, who ran for president, what did he want to do to help the middle class?" It does a better job of answering the question than I could do by myself. That's why AI could be good. It goes into like your plan for Social Security, right? And how, in the end, it would really help the country and the middle class. So for people who must know Larry's plan, which is my plan, and that's what I tell people. I'm not a genius in everything. Larry and I disagree on certain things. When it comes to Social Security, he's like the world-renowned expert. So his plan is my plan, which we used to run for president. And the way it would really help the country with the dollar in the future, with the middle class, is that picture us actually having a computer, having someone who's 20, starting to put money into Social Security, people who are grandfathered in, get whatever, I'll give you the simplified version. Go out 13 years when the 65 trillion now has a future value of $65 trillion of unfunded liability is actually going to zero. People are dying. We actually spend more money to do this. But picture 13 years later, where a 33-year-old and a 40-year-old who started to get into the program says, wow, I'm not going to get $3,000 when I'm 65 with a deflated dollar. I'm getting 15 grand per month when I turn 68 or when they stop buying the annuities and so forth. Guess what, honey? We could buy a home. We have a better shot because our retirement plan looks really good, not really terrible. Because today, anybody 33 to 40 or 45 who visits with a financial planner, even Maxify, the answer is plan on not getting it, save more. Because you're actually not getting it in any way, shape, or form. Could you get $3,000 that's really worth $1,000 in real terms 20 years from now? Of course you could. Are you ever going to get a real number that means anything to you when you're 35 today? The answer is no. So how do you help the middle class? That's a great way to help the middle class. How about changing the Federal Reserve Board to only really do inflation and keep it at zero? Why they came up with 2%, I don't know. Why not change the Federal Reserve to put all of the fiscal problems back to Congress? So when the head of the Fed, if I was the head of the Fed, and we only did inflation at zero, and I used something like the Taylor rule or whatever it would be, right? I mean, there's ways to kind of keep it around a thing of zero. And I showed up at Congress and they said, oh, aren't you going to print some money? I'm like, no, we don't do that anymore. We keep inflation at zero. You're in charge of fiscal
So we have a lot of, okay, so we have a lot of things that we would do if we were, what you would do if you
We're
were,
not, the point is, we're not doing any of them.
yeah, yeah. We're
Trump's
not,
not going to do
we're
any of
not
these.
having any intelligent discussion of anything.
No,
We're having, seat of the pants, let's fix this in 10 seconds and just
TV
stop.
personalities discussing whether they hate or love Donald Trump.
Yeah. Or how much they love them. Yeah.
Right.
The, so, uh, what should people do individually, right now? How should they kind of deal with their finances, do you think?
I think that
Next few
I've
months?
said this only for a couple of months, but I think people should be prepared that the dollar is going to get a lot weaker at some point. It's historically very strong, which is why I've gone to Europe. So, so that's one thing. Starting to get interested today in Bitcoin and gold. Gold's at an all-time high. I mean, I don't tell people what I'm doing, but when I bought it a long time ago, it's like time to sell. Could it go higher? It's done well. These are things that, everybody, not everybody, many people just follow the herd of trying to involve in whether it's stocks. And today, I think it is really prudent that people start thinking, because I just read a statistic where the average 70-year-old is 80% in stocks. There's always been a good rule of thumb. 100 minus your age is what you should be in stocks. So if you're 70, you should be 30% in stocks. But I think people should be looking outside America, like I do all the time, thinking about buying a property in, another country, because why not buy one? The dollar's so strong against the Canadian dollar. We're not taking over. By the way, think about it. Would we want Canada, if you're a conservative Republican, to be a state? Two Democratic US senators, 15 Democratic. What are you talking about? So it's mostly a Democratic. You don't even make sense. But how many people have even pointed that out? Can you find someone on TV who just pointed out the logical conclusion if Canada said, we'd love to join, right? To be a state, not seven. Seven states would be like, 12 Democratic US senators, right? So if you're a Republican president, would you ever suggest that? Of course you would suggest it. So for people out there listening, I think you have to plan for the unexpected. You can't be secure, because we've had, by any, and not to get bore people with CAPE indexes, PE ratios, price to sales, the market cap to GDP. These are all at historical highs. And I've lived through cycles. Now,
What about moving out of stocks into inflation index? The 30
that's
year,
a good idea. I mean,
30-year
inflation
bond
index
just
bonds for
went.
some of your assets, again, would be fine. I try to find more exotic things. For example, again, I say these things and I don't want people, I don't have my licenses anymore. If you look up what I did, go to the Wall Street Journal, I was considered the best stock picker of the 1990s. Better than Goldman Sachs. There's an article in the Wall Street Journal. The best pocket pickers are in Memphis, Tennessee. I can put it up on my website again, and I'm the guy who picks the stocks. We outperformed Goldman Sachs by 2.5-fold over the 5 years I ran it. But what was I smart enough to do? I told Alan Morgan when I ran this focus list around 2000, I'm out. He's like, what are you talking about? We're gathering all these. I said, I've had 5 great years. You can't have the president of the firm have a terrible year. I'm also the president of the chief operating officer. I run the trading desk. I'm head of investment banking. I have a lot of jobs. So I got out. It's time to get out. If you're sitting there thinking, I'm just getting into Bitcoin today, where were you? I should run a hedge fund. I know, and I don't. I run a Steve Laffey hedge fund, but I'm like 90% cash today, looking for alternative investments. Is palladium a better investment than gold? I think so. For example, people don't talk about palladium, right? Its all-time high is like 3,000, trades at 900 something. But why would you get involved in things at all-time highs all the time? I know momentum people do, but you can see things happening now that are much like 1999 to 2000. We could talk about AI. You've had some great guests on your show talk about AI. You don't have to know the answer to AI to know that in stocks, so many promises get made, whether it's storage companies in the 1990s, whether it's just tech, or it could be Amazon going down twice 90% before it really becomes an established company. You don't want those. The way to make money, and I learned this from a trading desk at Payne Webber. Listen carefully, folks. Eat like an elephant, poop like an ant. You have to keep your losses very small. You have to know that if you're wrong a little bit, you're wrong. You can't average down all the way down all the time and then puke out. you have to preserve your capital to wait for a cheap market, which the last cheap market was March of '09. In March of '09, they changed the accounting rules to mark things to call rather than market, so banks weren't broke. We can go over why they did that. That was the beginning of a new bull market. We are way into the eighth and ninth inning of a bull market.
I see. Okay.
So you have to find alternative things. By the way, I'm an expert in yellow diamonds. I'm an expert in, I find alternative things I never speak about that have done really well. You don't have to be in stocks. Small cap stocks are actually pretty cheap, but when things go down, they all get cheaper. Never forget that other rule. So you have to be very careful, but always be prepared to fight another day. If you're 70-year-olds, listen to this. You can't have a drawdown. You cannot have a drawdown of 30, 40% if you have $2 million. You will jump out a window and hopefully it's only on the first floor. You
Right.
can't do that. And
And
things are very
meanwhile,
expensive.
standard, all of Wall Street's financial planning has you imagine that you're going to be able to set a
Yes.
target for spending and keep spending it, uh, and have a probability of maybe 85% of not running out. But they're telling people just keep spending no matter
Yeah.
what happens to your assets. That's their basic Monte
It's
Carlo
ludicrous.
simulation analysis. It's completely
They have Wall Street has, listen, I lived on Wall Street. I actually, at Payne Webber, that's what it was. I found a guy named Alan Morgan and John Stokes, totally honest, in the South. I gravitated there. I had 9 years of the greatest years of my life and I retired. I have never really effectively worked since I was 39. I guess I should have been like the guy.
Ryan Cranston. I think you worked.
Well, that made 80 grand a year. Wasn't really a job. That was, whatever it was, right? I had health insurance, but I
Public
really
service.
effectively checked out. And I maybe shouldn't have because my talent is actually in this stuff, but I thought I could help my town and maybe the country. I failed to help the country so far, but I'm maybe not done. Who knows, right? You always fail until you're successful. People forget that, right?
Right.
So, but these people at large firms just have products to sell you no matter what. People should avoid that at all costs. You should not be in illiquid. How many of my friends have been in illiquid things where all of a sudden it's like, how do I get out? Products, they could be oil and gas, they could be, and always done by the smartest people in the world with the greatest presentations of all time. It's better as you get older to be more liquid. Where I right now can get off this show, I'm actually short the market as I sit here today a little bit. I got some volatility plays, things I won't go into, but I could just change my mind. That's why I hesitate to tell people anything because I will then go to 95% cash and wait for another day. But that's me. That's how I operate. People really can't do that, I know, but you can't have these drawdowns and you can't be involved in products that are liquid as you get older. It's one thing to be 30 and take lots of risk and then start a company and just, that's great. If you don't have the energy for it, you got to be liquid and then maybe downsize what you're thinking, right? Whatever that
Or,
means.
build yourself a living standard floor. We call this in our company, our Maxify.com software has this upside investing uh, routine, a program that lets you set a living standard floor based on tips, building a tips ladder, and then having some money in risky assets, the stock market, holding them for a period, no sequence of return risk, and then gradually converting, and that gives you the upside. So your living standard floor only goes up because when you convert, you buy more tips, you spend only out of tips. You're only spending out of safe assets. You never spend out of any. You always treat risky assets as lost until they're found. That's a way for a
Yeah, the way to survive.
70-year-old to be able to sleep at night,
Yeah.
still be able to talk to their neighbor when their neighbor makes a killing in the market, they make a killing, not as big a killing, but a killing, they do well as well.
And
But
if you're not, and I'll tell people this, if you're not willing to do what I've done for 37 years, if I showed you my desk, it's this stuff everywhere, right? I've called you about certain products or whatever, or copper gets cheap or whatever,
right.
but I spent a lifetime on this, right? A lifetime. I can tell you about my major mistakes that I write down. I have books, don't do this again. I may have more losers than winners, but my winners are big, I mean, things I've done with the A2 Milk Company back when no one had ever heard of this thing. It was 16 cents in New Zealand. People can't do that. They have another way of living. So if they're younger, they should try to make more money. They should raise their saving rates. They should look at your map. I've looked at all the stuff that you do, of course, and it's very competent, but stay away from the products. I will tell you that I actually think another trend that's about to emerge, and I'm going to call it the return of the stock picker. I think the ETF thing is going way too far to one direction. And people should really not concentrate on ETFs, especially if they're involved in the Mag 7 and whatever the people call this stuff. It reminds me of 1999, 2000, when everybody was in. And it takes a long time. Remember this one statistic. From March of 2001, after the year 2000 problem, people, these are really easy things to look back on, right? Everybody had to have a new computer. Morgan Keegan had to spend a $500 million revenue firm, $30 million on stuff. So the following spring, Dell Computer says something like, we're not selling that many computers. Well, of course they're not. Usually people replace computers every 4 years, except they replaced them all the year before. The NASDAQ market, which had a peak of whatever it was, didn't get back to that peak for 15 years. If you were 70 then, and you were 80% in the stock market like you are today, you never recovered.
Right. Well, this is a good, I think, parting message. We've got very uncertain times. We've got very uncertain geopolitics here. We have someone who's completely, makes it up every day, wants to make
Yeah,
the
it's
news,
going to get worse.
is looking at the news to make sure his image is on there. And this is just going to continue. So one has to have safety here. And that does not involve 80% of the market. That does
Yeah.
not involve keeping, if you've made money in Bitcoin.
And I've made a lot of money in Bitcoin. As of
Yeah.
today, I own none.
Yeah.
I wait for a giant oversold. I'm not against Bitcoin. I'm not against these things. I'm just saying, and I point out another thing, for example, about fascism as we end. We can't really have a Donald Trump create a national sovereign wealth thing like Norway because they have a lot of oil, right? Like he wants to do it to play around with TikTok, which is illegally kept open, whether you feel he should or shouldn't. It's been shut down by the Supreme Court. So this is the stuff about fascism I'm talking about. He'll try to do a national wealth fund and then buy TikTok. like we can't have this, folks. You can't just buy palladium, just play around with it or like a stock.
Yeah.
This is
National
wrong.
that actually goes down the tubes. Right.
We need the rule of law, and we're missing it on so many issues we've discussed today. And it gets back to, we didn't even discuss education, which I am an expert in. I've homeschooled kids. I've educated them in 6 different ways. I put them all through university at cheap rates. I got a 16-year-old at grad school. I am an expert in these things. Donald Trump doesn't want experts. He wants people to bow down to him and do what he thinks they want. And that's the real problem in America today, to build up this uncertainty, which will pop. And when it pops and people flee the US dollar or rates go so high, you better not be sitting around saying, oh, I thought I should have some more Bitcoin because it would save me.
Okay.
They generally don't.
Steve, thanks so much. This has been, as ever, enlightening and scary. And,
Yes. Well, I love you. You're a great friend, and I appreciate all you do for everybody, and people don't know, even for my family. I'm very appreciative.
well, I love you guys.
Love you, buddy.
Okay.